Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the cybersecurity breakout session. My name is John Dunn. I've had a 20-year career with GE Healthcare. More importantly, I've been a member of Technology United for over a decade, and it is my great honor to introduce this world-class panel of cybersecurity experts. I want to start by giving a shout out to Anthony DeCruz. He'll be helping out with some of the moderation of the chat. He is the CIO of HSA Bank, and he's also a co-chair of Technology United. On the panel, we have Bernd Huber. He is the Chief Information Security Officer of SC Johnson. He's a security expert with a diverse background in manufacturing technology and now consumer packaged goods. Thanks for joining, Bernd. We also have Sheldon Cuffey on. He is the VP and Enterprise Chief Information Security Officer of American Family Insurance. He has a 20-year cybersecurity background in high tech and manufacturing. He is a graduate of Milwaukee Tech. He is also a veteran from the U.S. Army. Sheldon, thank you so much for your service. And finally, we have Pablo Slavin. He is the VP and Chief Information Security Officer of Freighter Health. He's been in the security realm for since the mid-90s, 25-year veteran, involved in industries from software development to finance. And since 2005, he's been working in the healthcare space. I think it's important to establish the importance of cybersecurity. And just to start off, trying to capture what's the scale of the challenge that we face. And estimates are really difficult to capture and what the value of cybercrime a year. On the low end, they start at around $150 billion. And some estimates go up to over a couple $1 trillion with a double-digit compound annual growth rate. So I always like to start by understanding if those stats translate to us in the Milwaukee market. Now, last year, I asked everyone to stand up if they were a victim of some kind of cyber crime or an incident. And it was shocking to look around the ballroom and see literally everyone standing up. This year, we're going to leverage some polls throughout the panel. So I'll ask our moderator, Dustin, who's running production and just done an amazing job so far today, keeping us informed and running us through this virtual event, if you can throw up poll number 1. And what we're trying to understand is if you or your organization has had a cyber incident in the past year since we last met. And while folks have the time to answer that, I'm going to start asking our panelists some questions. And I'm going to start with Pavel. No industry has been impacted like healthcare over the last year. So I'm going to ask you a two-part question. The first one is, if you wrote an autobiography, what would the title be? And the second one would be, how has the change in the healthcare market impacted cybersecurity for you?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for United Way to invite me to this panel discussion. So let me start a little bit about going over 2020, and it seems like a groundhog day for most of us. But in the healthcare industry, and John, you can relate to it since you integral part of that space. We've been probably hit from so many different angles, not just with pandemic and ability to respond to pandemic, and obviously our healthcare professionals did a miraculous job in the Milwaukee area, being able to respond 7/24 and not closing our facilities and being responsive to our patients. But also, how do we allow, how do we provide for our support staff, administrative staff, to be able to provide that support that is required for medical professionals? As any organization, we've been able to send most of the folks home to provide the support from their remote location. I'm still in my remote location providing that support. But from a security perspective, healthcare industry probably has undergone the most attacks than any other industry in 2020. You all seen the news, you all been part of that. The ransomware attacks are coming at us hard and heavy. October of last year, December of last year, probably 2 notorious months in our space where we had to pray that we're not going to be hit by the same velocity of attacks than other healthcare organizations did. So it took quite a bit. It took quite a bit, not just our personal drive to protect the environment, to protect our organization, but it also the non-technical individuals, non-technical professionals. I mean, phishing is still probably the most predominant way for somebody to be able to get into your environment. So it takes all of us. It takes all of our clinicians, healthcare professionals, transporters, you name it, to be able to respond to that. So 2020 was a real tough year. And it seems like healthcare as an industry in general is being continuously attacked, not just attacked by viruses and pandemics, but also attacked by malicious individuals. And it's probably going to continue. I mean, we're probably going to see increased amount of attacks in biotech vectors and pharmaceutical vectors, where a lot of vaccine, a lot of IP is probably going to be hunted for. But all we can do is just get ready.
Thanks, Pablo. And if you were to write an autobiography following this year, what would the title of it be?
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. Yes. Thank you. All right. And Bernd, you're working in the consumer packaged goods space. Another one that's been dramatically impacted from the last year from a cybersecurity standpoint. How have you responded in relation to all the changes over the last year?
Well, thank you, John. And first of all, thank you for United Way for having me on this panel. I'm very honored and humbled to be here. I think 2020 has been an incredibly difficult year for all of us and also for the manufacturing space, because not only did we have to deal with the challenge of how do you enable a remote working area function, but also how do you deal with all the supply chain disruption that happens. So you have the resilience of your supply chain against the pandemic, and at the same time, threat actors becoming more interested in causing disruption in your cyber resilience of the supply chain. So there's a lot of work that we've done to move the security out on the edge to enable remote working, and a lot of work that's happening, especially in the manufacturing space, to strengthen your third-party processes and your third-party security. I think that's a trend that you will continue to see. The more you will rely on third-party suppliers, I think over the next few years, we'll see a lot of attacks in that space impacting your ability to produce and deliver goods.
Great, thanks, Bernd. And what would be the name of your autobiography?
The autobiography for me probably would be Failed Project Manager and Recovering Enterprise Architect.
Okay, thank you. And Sheldon, I mean, you've got an incredible distributed workforce from American Family Insurance. How have you guys responded to kind of all the changes of the last year?
Yeah, thanks, John, and happy to be here with all my peers as well, and everyone in the Milwaukee area. Yes, 2020 was definitely unprecedented in terms of how do we manage a workforce remotely, how do we ensure they're productive, how do we keep them safe on what we would call insecure or degraded home networks. So a lot of work went into over roughly a 4-week period of shifting all of our employees out of our corporate offices around the country and even agents' offices. So that provided a whole different challenge than we're used to. I know in past roles, even most of our agents were in larger offices. American Family agents are in storefronts in some cases because that's where our customers are. So the solutions that you apply aren't cookie cutter, and we had to apply, we had to adapt and improvise quite a bit to make sure that we could secure all of our endpoints, ensure our folks could be productive, and that we could keep our business running so that we could service our customers.
No, thanks, Sheldon. Good point. And if you wrote an autobiography, what would you title it?
Well, it's not specific to 2020, but I've actually had 5 years to think about this. So the title would be Steel, Sand, and Security. So there's a little bit of an homage to my father growing up in, me growing up in Milwaukee. He was a steel foundry worker for many years. And so the sand represents the black sand that you use to make castings. Got it.
Well, hey, thanks, Sheldon. Glad to have you on the panel as well, and thanks to all of our panelists. Pablo brought up ransomware, and we saw a massive escalation of ransomware over the last year, not just in the October to December in the healthcare space, but the groups like Maze doing exfiltration. Pavel, how did you prepare the team in order to fight some of these challenges, and how did you respond to the pretty significant attack in the healthcare space?
Yeah, thank you, John. The ransomware attacks, it's obviously something that is devastating to any business, not just healthcare business, but healthcare business in particular. I just read an article, I think it was early January, when the Vermont healthcare system, that was a part of an attack, and from October 28th, they still haven't been recovered in January. So we're talking about, the downtime procedures for a healthcare organization. It's a significant impact where not every single information available to you at the palm of your hands. So you always gotta, you cannot assume that ransomware is something you can definitely 100% protect yourself against, because obviously if you're going against a nation state, or if you're going against a very deliberate attacker, penetrated in some way, shape, or form. So I always tell my team, embrace that no. Assume that you've been attacked. What are the next steps? You have to be prepared to respond. So a lot of our efforts being in preparation to our response. Do we have the plans or the incident response playbooks that we execute readily? Do we have the incident response command center set up? Do we have them tested? Do we have exercises? So that's where we've been spending quite a bit of our time. If you look at the NIST CSF model, where you identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, every single aspect needs to be addressed in some way, shape, or form at your designated maturity levels. We have chosen on the detect and response to be the first two that we want to spend our time, efforts, and money to be able to get them to the maturity levels that we can actually rely on.
Great, Pavel. And some really important things there, and a lot of it has to do with how do you spend your money. So it's good to hear your prioritization. Bernd, when you look at kind of the distribution of funds for cyber, how do you run your prioritization across the different areas of prevention, detection, and response? And while you're answering that, I'll ask Dustin to throw up poll number 2 if you can.
Wow, I get the difficult question. So we have a very mature framework on how we're looking at risk from an appetite perspective and the individual risk tolerances. So we have a good understanding of what is important to the organization, where does critical data sit, and what are mission critical business processes and systems that we need to protect. And of course, we're doing like what everybody else does, protect your email system. As Pavel said, that's where most of your attacks are coming in today. And we are ensuring and focusing on preventing the threat from coming in. But then also, malware is always going to enter an environment. How do you make sure it can't do any damage? So we're having this dual-pronged approach, protecting the enterprise and protecting crown jewels and mission-critical systems. That sounds very easy. Now, when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, how do you distribute your limited funds? One of the things we're doing is not only do we deploy technologies to prevent malware from coming in, we also have the ability, using the MITRE ATT&CK framework, to test our systems. How effective are they against a variety of attacks? So with some of the tooling, you can figure out, hey, my PC is 90% effective against ransomware attacks. That gives you some understanding of where do you need to go from a investment perspective. If your regular managed PC is at 90%, but your HMI interfaces are at a lower rate, well, you may want to shift your control structure to HMIs. If your data exfiltration is not mature, you want to focus on that one. So using an approach of risk quantification, understanding of where your qualitative risks sit, and understand where your actual holes are is what we're using to distribute those funds.
Great, thanks, Bernd. And the other thing that emerged over the last year, it's not really just the boundaries of the enterprise, but Sheldon, I want to ask you, because I know you had some interesting events this year where the risk of third parties can pose on a company. How can that impact your business, and how do you respond to the risk that third parties are encountering over the course of your business processes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that one of the best things you have to do is ensure that you have an inventory of who those third parties are. I would say IT teams, we tend to focus more internally on the systems that are in our data centers and our clouds. And we forget about the connected parts of the ecosystem that support our call centers, our customer operations, our claims, et cetera. And so it's incumbent upon us to not just focus as technologists, but think about the business context and the ecosystem that we're operating in, and be curious, ask questions about, oh, well, how is that process getting done? And then map those processes and then overlay the technical controls, the administrative, the physical, the technical, to actually mitigate the risk associated with those business processes. So the stat I gave you, John, earlier in the week was over the past 2.5 years, my teams and I have responded to 18 third-party vendor incidents that had ransomware events that had real potential to disrupt our operations, whether it's a call center not being able to take calls for PCs, or a provider that is providing financial and tax reporting capability. So these events are very real. Sometimes they're disconnected, sometimes they're connected to your network, and then that's where I think where Pavel and Bernd, we're talking about response time, speed matters in this case. And that's where defensive action, cyber defense capabilities, you have to have that stuff ready and at the ready and know what to do with urgency. So all of that plays into a pretty significant evolving threat landscape that is doing increasing, and it's speeding up every day.
Got it. Well, thanks. Thanks, Sheldon. The next question, I'm going to open it up to everyone a little bit here, because we talked about how to protect your own company and the impact that third parties can have on that. The other area that doesn't get as much attention sometimes is the insider threat. A small minority of the employees that work in our respective enterprises have been compromised either by foreign entities or for their own personal gain. And I was wondering if anyone wanted to share a story or some of the work that they're doing to control the insider threat.
Well, I can start, John. I think the insider threat is very real, and I think we all know it. And I think we also need to be really understanding what that means. Normally, when you hear insider threat, you think about the malicious intent of a person trying to do something. One of the learnings that I think we have is, more often than not, there is no malicious intent. It's bad judgment or just an honest mistake. And people just didn't know that, well, you're not supposed to do that. What it highlights to me is that the consumerization of IT and the ability to use technology in a cloud-enabled age is moving so fast that people use it but don't really understand how it is not compliant with your corporate policies or your company standards. And a lot of education has to happen in order to whittle down the unintentional insider risks.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So let's even take that and translate it into a very specific scenario. So the risk that the business faces. So we have a potential for the accidental disclosure of information to an unauthorized third party. So that's the scenario. And that can occur by mailing the wrong statement to a customer. It can occur by a developer utilizing online storage capability or moving their code into a code repository that's not secured. So you start to run the risk scenario, and then what are the vectors for risk against that? And then that becomes very real and in plain English for our business stakeholders and partners out there, the type of risk that we're facing. And I totally agree with Bernd. I would say 99% of the stuff that I've seen is accidental. It's not malicious, but there is that 1%, and I've experienced that too. And I would say CISOs, CIOs, don't be naive about that. and I would say I was at one point. So I think as CISOs, we like to talk about the good things we do. They're the highlight reel. There's the bad side of stuff that happens, and you have to account for that 1%.
Thanks, Sheldon. I feel really bad about this, Pavel. But you're going to get the question you didn't want. Sheldon brought up, the risk that we have of our software development processes, and one of the big hacks of the year, the SolarWinds, involved just that, the compromising of the software development process. And I was curious, how can we be confident in the systems and products that we're securing? And while you answer that, I'm going to ask Dustin to roll poll number 3 for all of us, which I think will be interesting to see where the results are on that one. But Pavel, did anything change as a result of SolarWinds, and how do you have confidence in your suppliers?
Yeah, thanks, John, for this question. Yeah, SolarWinds is obviously an eye-opening experience for the most of us. This is the worst case scenario, the ultimate horror movie that everybody's experiencing in the last 3-4 months seems to be now. Just so everybody's aware of what we're talking about here, we're talking about not just the supply chain issue. We're talking about a determined state-sponsored attack against a vendor that has thousands and thousands and thousands of installations and customers around the world, not just the United States. And the attack is so successful that they've been able to modify the installation package for that software that was undetected by all our controls, all our tools. And we're not just talking about, non-for-profit healthcare organization. We're talking about federal government. We're talking about multi-billion corporations and leading security firms like FireEye and Mandiant. There are obviously tools and technologies that will allow us to see certain things. It's not as obvious. Everybody's familiar with dynamic and static code scanning techniques, but even those probably will be undetecting this type of vulnerabilities because they are because the attack itself was so sophisticated. So you're absolutely right, John. I mean, there's got to be something done, and that something cannot be done just by a corporation or industry. It has to be done at the federal level. We have to be able to protect our country, and that's exactly what we're talking about here: protecting the country from the organized state-sponsored attack.
Yeah, it's some scary stuff, Pavel. And since you bring up the nation-state aspect of cybersecurity, countries are responding in different ways to protect themselves. And we're seeing a little bit of a divergence in regulatory frameworks and the laws that we're operating under. Bernd, do you want to comment on some of the things that you're seeing that are changing in terms of global regulatory environment?
Sure. When it comes to the regulatory space, I think it's still very emerging. You see the big regulatory focus on protecting people and people's private information. Everybody knows about GDPR. You see CCPA in California, and you have various local regulations, be it the Russian regulation or China's cybersecurity law that is very interesting from an encryption perspective. I see that this is going to become more and more complex, both in the scope, going from privacy all the way to opposing cybersecurity laws sometimes in various countries. It's going to be very difficult for organizations to work through that in the future. And I think we have to change our techniques and tactics on how this is addressed. I think we all know about China. A lot of companies over the last 20 years have taken the same approach to connect to their networks from any location using VPN. It was one VPN solution for everybody. There are many companies that now have changed their approach and say, well, you know what, this country we have to be having completely separate. We have different finance regulations in different countries. So this is just, the world is getting more complex and complicated.
It absolutely is. And I think now that I'm sufficiently terrified again because of the risks of our own company, the risks externally, our suppliers, our insiders. Now, the government's not necessarily making things easier. It puts a lot of pressure on everyone in cybersecurity. So Sheldon, how do you keep your team engaged and motivated to go in and fight this fight every day? And with that, I'll ask Dustin to throw up poll number 4 as we bring it back to some of the people. But Sheldon, if you can help comment on what you're doing for your teams, because I know it's a tough one out there.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's probably one of the key questions that as we manage our workforces, we have to be aware of that. We have all the tools and technology, but we have human operators that are helping us protect the brand and reputation of these companies. And what we know to be real is a high degree of burnout, high degree of stress, alcohol usage, divorce, all the things that you would see in military organizations, frankly, law enforcement, in other professions. And so it's incumbent upon us as the leaders is to ensure that we are not burning out the scarce resources that we have. And so part of that is, it's multiple fold, but one, identifying when there's operator fatigue within your staff, just like you would in a manufacturing company. If someone is tired or maybe making mistakes, you pull them off the line and make sure they're well and healthy. The same thing applies for cybersecurity folks in general. The other thing is just to make sure that folks understand the mission that they're on. And my time in the military has served me well in that regard in terms of connecting with what are the mission objectives, what are we here for, and that starts to transcend just even a job or a paycheck. We're fighting for something that really matters, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to ensure our companies are protected, in particular in our case our customers, and that they have trust and safety not only on the road but in terms of how we handle their information. So this is where a more employee-centric, empathy, behavioral perspective, just walking around now virtually via Zoom, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do? That stuff goes a long way and really matters.
Well, great answer, Sheldon. I know I've been taking notes, just some great insights from yourself and Pavel and Bernd. I've taken some great notes, and I'm going to do some things differently on Monday with some of the insights that have been shared. We've got just a minute or two before we start taking questions from the audience, and I am going to try and do just a quick speed round. These are really simple questions, just a couple of them. I'm not going to call out any person. If you feel you want to answer, just shout it out, and it'll be a little bit of a free-for-all just to go through the next 120 seconds here. So here we go. What's a bigger risk? Hackers who want to be known and get paid, or the hackers who get in, get what they want, and get out unnoticed?
Later.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It depends who you are. If you're Amazon, maybe the former. If you're a company that is less publicly known, probably the later.
All right. Is the cloud helping or hurting our cybersecurity?
Helping.
Six or half a dozen.
Definitely.
Any trick? Oh, sorry, Pavel.
Definitely helping.
Okay. Any tricks to helping identify an insider threat?
Movement of data via email in the middle of the night, excessive use of file storage platforms, Dropbox, Box.
All right. What's the trick to getting business partners? Oh, sorry, Bernd.
Sending emails to your personal account.
Oh man, that's the only way I can print.
And there's an insider.
What's the trick to getting business partners to classify or categorize data?
Help them understand why it's important and why it helps them achieve their business objectives.
Contractual agreements.
I'm going to say cost, because if we have to protect everything at the same level, that's very costly. If we can focus and filter, we can bring costs down.
Shift left, shift right, and does it matter? Which would you prefer?
Shift left.
All right, what's the best metric for the board of directors?
Coverage and visibility of your network.
All right, with that, thank you so much. That concludes the speed round. Great answers, kind of fun. Anthony, I know we've been taking some questions throughout the course of this panel. I also hope we saw the survey or the polling results. I didn't on my screen. But Anthony, any questions we want to ask the panel here from the audience?
Yeah, John and the panel, we got a bunch of really good questions. So the first one is, with the shift to remote workforce, what changes does the panel expect in the security space around bring your own device and zero trust versus IT organizations doing central procurement or having all devices on the network?
So I think for us, the remote workforce has been an acceleration on extending the zero trust network to all of the endpoints. So in our case, it's been I don't care where the device is as long as it has the right protections or the same protections as the enterprise. Taking that approach, it really also opens you up to say, how do you securely enable BYOD? I think it's been accelerating the whole ubiquitous compute and ubiquitous access, at least for us.
So everything Bernd said, plus increased adoption of virtual images so that you can leverage BYOD. We're working on some identity related stuff to kind of minimize the amount of passwords and do more risk-based authentication. So many industries have been doing that for years, but I think we're all catching up and accelerating.
Yeah, so in the healthcare space, it's not just sending everybody home with their remote equipment. We actually use the hybrid approach. We use the always on managed VPN services, but also providing the virtual care and telemedicine. So combination of those things, actually different techniques and different workflows had to be put in place. So there is a place for zero trust, but we do still rely on our own corporate issued equipment to be able to connect the corporate network.
Great, thank you. The next question here is relating to moving to the cloud. How have security expectations changed when going to the cloud? Do the same rules apply as on-prem, or do you entrust certain aspects to the cloud provider? And does that make it easier for your teams?
Let me maybe get started with this. So I have a slightly unique view on the cloud and the security in the cloud, and it has to do with a lack of overall general security skill in a marketplace. You cannot assume that every single company is going to be able to employ skillful security folks. And where's the skill goes? I mean, not everybody can afford that. That's why you're looking at Amazon and Microsoft and Cisco and Google. They do have capability to employ and deliver security services at the levels that are expected. Now, the problem with that is that it's not something that is available to you by default. It's something that you have to really work in order to get it configured the way it's supposed to be done. So there's skill available, there are tools available, how they use and how they utilize it.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the cloud, I never liked that term because there's so many different clouds and what they do. But what I think the cloud has allowed organizations to do is focus away from securing the infrastructure or the system itself to having to secure how the system is being used. Historically, when it's been on premise, well, you had to patch it and you had to do lifecycle manager technology, which was a huge pain for everybody. Now, when it's in the cloud, you have to make sure, well, everybody in the world can access it. You have to focus on the identity. You have to focus on the data that it doesn't move off your managed endpoint. That's what I said earlier. Is the cloud helping? Is it hurting? it's a shift from focusing on securing the tool to securing how you use it and how you build your resilience about any kind of event.
Hey, before we go on, Dustin, can you bring up the poll results? Here we go. All right, half and half. What about the next poll? Interesting. Not much on the respond. Show us poll number 3. There we go. Yeah. Poll number 4. The ability for incidents to happen after 5 o'clock on a Friday is truly amazing. Sorry, Anthony, but that was fun to kind of look at. Hand it over for some more questions.
Yeah, sure. No, that was so fun. So we've got a couple of questions here about extending the network, outside of the 4 walls of the organization. So, with the shift to remote work and the emphasis on creating a frictionless environment for employees, how do you balance the needs of ubiquity, right? Access anytime, any place, any device, with security? And related to that, what does the panel think about extending the corporate network into the homes of employees?
So there are a lot of ways to do that safely. And again, these patterns have been used in many industries for years. In particular, there are just some basics. What is the same? We had people traveling in airports and in hotels and connecting from insecure guest Wi-Fi locations for years, right? So none of this is really new, but what is new is that it is at scale. And now we have to make sure the blocking and tackling, the security hygiene, as I like to call it, you have to have some type of EDR capability on your devices. Antivirus is not enough anymore. You also need some type of cloud proxy that you can push traffic through. So that's where actually the cloud helps. We can automate actions based on that traffic, as opposed to assuming we just have a dispersed and fragmented network out there sitting in homes. So lots of different easy solutions, albeit somewhat costly to solve that problem.
All right. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, maybe 2 more questions. So in your speed round, John asked about shift left versus shift right. One of the questions we got: what are some actions for shift left, or examples of that?
One in particular is doing threat modeling on your software and applications early. So we talk about application security, we talk about DevSecOps, embedding security resources. Bernd and I were doing this a few years back, embedding software engineers into the pipelines, into the teams that can actually code. They're respected as a part of that pod, but they can securely develop with the rest of the team.
And I think it was John who, in our prep call, made a comment that really had me intrigued, and I think is right on. As part of this shift left, organizations have to become comfortable with moving from 100% prevention to also how do you do effective incident management. It is a risk-based decision. Shift left gives you a tremendous amount of speed to market, increased profitability. How do you manage that? Undoubtedly, incidents will happen. How do you manage it effectively so that a small incident doesn't become a big problem? And as the threats continue to grow, I think that's going to be a growing skill for all of the CISOs. How do you manage incidents effectively and prevent them from escalating?
All right, I think we'll have time for just one more question. So apologize to the folks that have posted other questions, but we're running out of time. I think the last one here, this is a broad area that's constantly evolving. What are your favorite resources, podcasts, websites, newsletters, anything like that, for staying current on the area of security?
My personal favorite is We Secrets from HISAC. this is, you know, the ISACs as an organization, they do a wonderful job in coordinating all the, you know, specific sectors and coordinate activities around them. So I found the HISAC, We Secret, is very current. There's very good talent is involved in current affairs and publishing all the necessary articles, tools, you know, information that you should be following, as I see.
So my go-to is the Defense in Depth podcast, which is excellent. Also, a very simple tip, hashtag cyber on Twitter and just read, and you will get lots of practical, tactical knowledge.
For me, it's the Defense in Depth cyber podcast. I also read a lot of German security blogs. I've done this for the last 20 years, so I'm hooked in that. And it gives you very good insight if you read international blogs to also understand when you're in a global organization, what are these developments? So it's helped me also find some rather obscure websites giving me insights about local regulations.
I'm going to throw Darknet Diaries in there for the sole reason that your wife and children can probably listen to it with you. Which makes it a little bit more fun. Olympic Destroyer was an awesome episode if you want to catch that one. Great question, though, because we all got to stay current. Hey, I know we're probably a little bit over on time. I want to thank all of our panelists. Fascinating discussion about cybersecurity, relevant for all of us. Bernd, Pavel, Sheldon, thank you so much. And just a reminder that alone we can make a difference, but together we can, or united, we can really change the world. Thank you, and that'll conclude the panel today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.